I really do appreciate all the hard work that the PTA does, and it sounds like amazing things are happening at Farragut. And I think I am going to be inspired by you and say something that I'm really excited that happened to me this week, and that is like we did a few months ago, maybe a month ago, we visited Farragut. Well, this week we visited El Marino, and we had a chance to say hello to teachers, administrators, our green ambassadors, and we even get a chance to and participate briefly in their experiment, and got a strong whiff of some carrots bean compost. And so that was an exciting moment this week for me. Now I'll pass it on to my colleague, Dr. Kent.
Hi, so I'm Dr. Kelly Kent. I'm Vice President of the CCUSD Board of Education. And I think Board President Amezola, you're inviting me to share something I'm excited about. Is that
Yeah.
the prompt here? Okay, just wasn't sure. Yeah, we wanted to start with some things that we're excited about, but I will actually pick up where you left off and just appreciate all the hard work that you all are doing and all the hard work that the PTA, the outgoing board, incoming board, we couldn't do what we're doing without you as our liaisons to the individual sites and our partners in keeping our district healthy and thriving. We're forever grateful for all of the work that you're doing. I loved hearing both the principal and assistant principal present a little bit. I get really excited hearing about all the data dives that you're doing, Principal Masterson, and prepping for next year, and that's our love language. Yeah, so I was just thinking that there's so much to be proud of, but the thing that came up for me was that when we had open house at the high school just a couple weeks ago, there were at least 3 different families that were parents of seniors graduating, and we were approached by these families telling us that they came not because open house is sometimes about the students preparing for their next year's enrollment. And so often that's the protocol, like the juniors will go and see to be sure what the classes they want to register for their senior year and so forth. So usually for seniors, it's less important, but all these parents of seniors came because they just felt so strongly about making sure they said thank you to every single one of their child's teachers, because they had so much appreciation and love and gratitude for the experience that they had had. So I thought that was beautiful, and I wanted to share that with you all. I'll give it back to you, Board President.
Okay, so we did get some questions beforehand, and we want to answer some of those questions, and then we will go and, if we have time, answer your questions. So it's not that we're ignoring your questions, is that we're going to answer the questions that were pre-sent to us. So is this a good time to get started on that? Is that correct, Ms. Pure?
Actually, I have a question. Can we start with the questions on hand since we're present at the meeting? Can we start with the people that are raising their hands and then move on to the questions that were emailed?
Okay, great.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so
President, I wonder if we should just start with describing our role just a little bit as a preamble?
Got it. Yes. I think that's a great idea. And then we'll go into answering the questions. Our role as the school board is that we are the citizen oversight for the local government. And so this is a cornerstone of democracy for the United States. So our school board is composed of 5 board members, and we ensure that the school district are responsive to the values, the beliefs, the priorities of our community. And that's why we have a citizen oversight of our school district. Now, the role really fulfills 5 things. And so this is where it gets sticky, because there's only 5 things that we do. First, we set direction. We think about the future of our district. And that's, to me, the most important thing we do. Second, we establish an effective and efficient structure. which as your president, I've had 2 board retreats to try to establish these protocols and encourage my board members, which I have 3 new board member colleagues, to learn these protocols, create new protocols so that we work efficiently as 5. The third role is we provide support to 1 employee. And our employee, the only one we hire, fire, evaluate, and support is the superintendent. The 4th thing that we do is we review the budget, we review the education curriculum, we review accountability. I see Mr. Levinson is here. So for example, we review our safety plans and ensure that we are meeting those accountability protocols. And the 5th thing that we do is that we advocate for our children. So as a school district, we advocate for more resources, more funding. For example, I will be attending a conference called Coast to Coast, where we go to Washington, D.C., and we advocate, and we will have a set of things that we advocate in D.C. for our school district and California. So I wanted to say that these are the 5 main responsibilities, and the best way to describe what the board does is that if you are, we know we are in fire country here in California. So God forbid that there was a fire and in your backyard or something like that, you have a choice to, if there was a mountain fire, and that you have a choice to stay indoors, watch the news, and strategize of what to do with the fire, or get the fire hose and start the fire, take out the fire with the fire hose that is happening, that is creeping from the mountain to your backyard. Those are the 2 choices that you have. As a board, the choice that we need to do is we provide oversight. So we have to stay in our living room, watch the newscast, what is happening, and address resources, help support our superintendent, set the direction on what do we need to do to prevent fires in the future. So that's the best way that I have come, that I learned from a book to describe the role of a board. So I hope that that's a good overview, because some of the answers that we give, it's like, hey, your point of person is X, or that is not in our purview. And so I think it's important to really establish what the board does. Okay, so let's get started with one of the questions that was placed.
Our President, there was one more piece of it that we were going to explain.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Which is just that folks may not know that we govern at the behest of a law called the Brown Act. And this means it's a pretty decent law in my very personal opinion, where I think the intent is to prevent cigar smoking backroom deals, where we cannot be in a group of the majority of the board. So we cannot be in a group of 3 or more of the board and discuss items that we may be voting on in the future without publicly agendizing and noticing that discussion. So we are never allowed to have a discussion with more than 1 other board member at a time, unless it's at a regularly scheduled board meeting or some other publicly noticed and agendized setting. And so that may come up tonight. So as questions are raised, there may be areas where we have to be more reserved in our answers than we might want, or you might want, because we can't reveal to each other or in a public setting necessarily how we're going to vote in the future. So we'll do our very best to answer your questions really comprehensively, but that may come up. So just going to let you know about that. And that, we're not the implementers. So the fire rescue story was appropriate, and I think that one really makes sense in terms of crisis response, but really most of what we're doing is thinking about the future. that's the primary role is that, of school boards, is to set the future of the district. So next year, next 5 years, now we're thinking 50 year, 100 years, like really that's the true work of what we're doing. And so we're not managing day to day. We do hire the leader who hires the staff who leads those activities. And so much of the time, questions about on the ground matters that occur day to day are going to always go first to the educators on the ground, the staff, and then the principal. So that'll be a lot of where we're going to be pointing people in terms of getting those on the ground answers. Okay.
Dr. Kent, can we move to questions?
Mm-hmm.
The first three were Ron, Christine, and Shay. So you three can start.
Christine, I think you were first. Go for it.
Hi, board members, Kent and Amezola. Thanks for coming to our meeting tonight. I just had a question, and I'm not the only one in the community with this particular question, is about the lack of a calendar. And I know that is something that the board approves and that the teachers have presented a proposed calendar to the board and have had to try and have negotiations. I'm not involved, but my question is the calendar in my mind is just a small issue in so many issues in the school district, such as just like education and safety. And the fact that it's almost May and we don't have a calendar, and it doesn't sound like we're gonna have a calendar, I'm just really concerned what the plan is with the future of our district, which I think is what you guys are working on. If we can't even solve these small administrative issues where it's like everybody in the community had a voice, but it's not our jobs to come up with a calendar. It's up to, I know that the teacher union has a say and then the board approves it. So I'm just kind of wondering where we are in terms of that calendar, and how do you explain that this one little thing has taken up so much time and we can't even get to the bigger things? So that's my question. Thank you.
I'm going to take this question, and I think no one's going to like this answer. It seems like everyone has read what's on Facebook. I recommend for you all to read the response that the district has provided. We are not part of the negotiation committee, and so thus we cannot, by law, discuss anything that is being discussed in negotiations. And so I really encourage everybody, and I'll look, maybe Dr. Kent, you can help find the link. I believe it went out in the Culver City patch this evening around 4 p.m., which has our response. And tomorrow, Friday, will be our full response from the district. It will come out in the Culver Pride. So I encourage, and I just want to apologize by saying, like, there's these laws and regulations that we cannot break because we can get in a lot of trouble. So this is one of them. We cannot explain anything that was just asked because it's part of negotiations. And the only thing that we can say, it's what's going to come out in writing. Again,
I'll just add that we actually have less say than we've ever had before. The board has less say now in the calendar than we've ever had before. So we are waiting just as much as all of you. I have kids in the schools. It's very frustrating. I am eager to approve a calendar the second it comes to us.
Okay, thank you. The next question.
Yes, I actually have two questions, specifics, but I'll precede it with one just overall question that I doubt if you can answer, but it may be helpful. The first one is if you can even give a general guesstimate, an unofficial guesstimate of a time period in which you feel we may have a calendar, not asking about whether Rosh Hashanah is going to be off or whatever, just do you think it's going to be within a week? Do you think it's going to be a month? We'll find out a week before school starts or whatever. So that was kind of a thrown in question. But my two questions pertain to the safety plan that you did pass, which is great because it's a nice, strong plan now. The first one is surrounding the issue of the school resource officer, the memo of understanding for the school resource officer, which is very important to establish the liaison. I know we have one still in effect. It's a very old one that's really kind of antiquated. So the superintendent had pledged to get it before you folks in April. So the first question is, if in fact he does bring it up in the at the April 25th meeting, is that something that you anticipate supporting, reestablishing that? And the second question, again, is CSSP related. As you well know, since you approved this part, fortunately, we did collectively change the established procedure for active shooters as relates to elementary schools, particularly in exterior situations on the playground. The existing procedure was a recipe for disaster, let's just say, without getting into it. But part and parcel with that new procedure is that yearly, the playground staff, anybody that supervises our kids on the playground, have to be trained in very specific elementary active shooter procedures. So I had proposed the mechanism for doing this, an amendment to the board policy in AR, which I know is under your purview. It's just adding one sentence that would guarantee that this training procedure be established. So my second question is, do we have your commitment to support such an addition to the policy?
So I want to start by giving for those who are not familiar with an MOU is, and an MOU is a memo of understanding. It's an agreement that we have between two entities. And so the last time we have actually a draft MOU, and we discussed it October 7th, 2022. And the SRO that has been in place for many years, sorry, I can't remember the exact number of years, but he's been our SRO, is Nick Wells, and he will continue to be the person that continues to service the whole district. During that discussion, there was a back and forth discussion about what we reviewed the draft, and there was comments that were submitted by the board and our student board members. And at the time, it was asked that we go to our student body and get student feedback before we approve it. So I am not sure that we have completed that step, which is to have the student body give feedback on the MOU. And this is a great question, Ron, that I will contact our student board members to see where they are at, to see if they have done that. But that is something that they said that they needed. And another thing is, for those who don't know, at that time, our student body told us, our student board members told us that there were students that wanted to come and do public comment, but it was already midnight and they had already left. And that was one of the reasons why in February we started doing all public comment at the top of the meeting, so that we can hear from the students when things like this type of agreement impacts their day-to-day lives, right? And so I think that the first part of the question about the calendar is, I cannot say anything about when a calendar is going to come. I sincerely apologize. And I want to say, one of the things that is in our statement is that we continue to be in conversation. We want to be in conversation with our labor partners. And that is, all we can say, that we continue to communicate with them. I don't know when the calendar's coming. I know it's frustrating. And I truly do apologize. The second thing is, the third
I
thing.
can take it. I'll take
Want to
it.
take the third one?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
board policy, great.
Yeah. So just to be clear, Mr. Levinson, this is exactly what we discussed on the phone yesterday. Do you want me to just restate what we talked about?
Sure.
Okay. So what Mr. Levinson has raised is that there is an addition that we need to make to our policy that impacts training for disaster preparedness and emergency response and so forth, in order to fully reflect what we have in our safety plans. So that is very much in the board's purview. And it was brought to my attention for the first time yesterday by Mr. Levinson. So,
And the principal, by the way, did follow your recommendation and submit that to the superintendent today.
great. And so I was going to say it was one of those perfect examples of this is the ideal scenario, like a parent notices, well, ideal in that we have wonderful involved parents and who are supporting us in our journey to be better all of the time. Maybe ideally it would have been noticed by staff first or whatever, but luckily we have folks that are supporting us all the time. And so Mr. Levinson notices, hey, your policy is okay, but doesn't fully reflect the most recent update to our plan. It should have a change. That goes to Principal Masterson. Principal Masterson sends that up to district to let them know. District brings an updated policy to the board and we, deliberate and vote it up or down. So now it's been brought to both the board's attention and the staff's attention. Principal Masterson is alerting the district or has already. And so we'll be addressing that in the near future to make that policy change. Did that fully answer the question?
Well, the question, it does, it helps, but the full answer is, do you support such a revision?
That's precisely the kind of question we cannot answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we would have to publicly deliberate on that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the question. Next question.
I do want to say though, if folks want to have individual conversations with board members about their positions, those are always possible.
Thank you. That's a great point. Next question. Oh, I do want to say, I see there's a lot of chatter in the chat. And so I do want to say that if you see in our the statement that the district is putting together on Friday, tomorrow, is on the chat box. It's by Dr. Kent. She put it, and then Megan Rawls posted our labor partners statement. So you can read for yourself exactly where we are at with negotiations. And both statements do say that they're negotiating for 2 years. So that is something I can answer. Melissa who put that? Melissa Sanders said is 2 years at a time. Yes, we can, and we are. Okay, next question.
Hi, thank you for coming to our meeting. I'm glad to have some personal Farragut time with our board members. I have one of the questions that I was going to ask was about the calendar as well. And I'm just wondering, I understand you can't speak to what is happening, but the negotiations that happened yesterday, Trans didn't come and he's the superintendent and the board's position is to influence and support the superintendent. So I'm just wondering how that works given what happened yesterday.
I can answer that question because as I stated at the beginning, no board member is part of the negotiations team. At the beginning of negotiations, a team is declared for labor and a team is declared for the district. And you can't then add new members once negotiations are going unless, something happens. But Mr. Tran has never been part of the negotiations team, and this is common practice. So it's not that he didn't show up, is that he was never part of the negotiations team. The reason is labor selects their negotiation team, district selects their negotiation team, they negotiate, and we can't at the very end say, like, we're going to add a new member. What if we said, we're going to add a lawyer, or we're going to add a second lawyer now that we see where you're at? I mean, it's just unfair to then change the rules of procedures. So that's where we're at. And I really,
do you, I mean, as a board though, do you, being that the conflict of what is holding this up is what these teachers want and need, how much do you influence that as a board? For what they
you expand on your question, because I haven't connected it.
Well, I think that they're struggling because they have an ask and they can't agree on what that ask, like what they're getting. So I'm just wondering, as a board, how much you have to do with, you know, in terms of like thinking ahead in terms of the future, which is what you said the board basically is doing.
Yeah, I think that, again, I am not going to answer like specifics, but I'm just going to say, in closed session, when we meet, there's a report back. This is where we are in negotiations, but that is the proper channels for it to happen. And so we will get a report back at the next meeting. This is where we are at with negotiations. And that's where the board, as 5, provides input into the negotiations team.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have made our asks, and so the team, the administrative team that's negotiating on behalf of the district, they are representing our asks, but we're just not at that table ever, and we never will be. And the superintendent isn't either. And I wanted to say that this is actually overlapping this recent episode where the superintendent was asked to join, but he's not part of the team, and he maintained that best practice of not then adding himself to the team because it's not recommended by any best practices of good labor negotiating. And so I'm glad that he did that, but it's also related to this other idea that we're trying to really help inform the public about that the chain of command is the most effective way. And so he would be undermining his team if he suddenly showed up and like overrode all of the rapport and work and relationship building that they were doing. It would make them feel very undermined and devalued, in the same way if Tran, didn't take Principal Masterson's information as the source and instead was directly intervening on the site of Farragut as if it was his site, right? Like that would undermine Principal Masterson, so I'm sure you can understand. And in that way, what he did was appropriate.
Okay, that makes sense to me, but obviously as a community, we're, undermining and the status of certain roles, I feel like eventually needs to take a backseat to giving the whole community an answer on this. But that sort of feeds into my next question, which is communication. And pardon my ignorance, I am a college graduate and I have been part of this district for a long time, and I'm still having a very difficult time understanding how it works. And your analogy, Paula, was good, but I can't, as a pedestrian, on a pedestrian level, cannot understand direct communication on what is happening in this district and how it operates. There's a lot of questions when you say that, like, you're advocating for the kids and that, your ideas to review for the budget. There's a lot of things that seem to me like the budget is really big for something that's only serving small amounts of kids. So it doesn't, to me, the communication and the ability for me to ask questions like this at a board meeting, that doesn't exist. I'm doing it here, but generally I don't feel that it exists in a board meeting, from an email, from a phone call. On a micro level, I can't pick up the phone and call the high school or the middle school because the phones are still down. On a macro level, I can't write a letter to the superintendent because it doesn't get answered. So these are big issues to me that make me think, like, what's the problem? It's a small community. We should be able to have direct communication on what's actually going on.
I want to just say, absolutely, I agree with you. contact us. And I want to be vulnerable right now and say to you, I've only been on the board for 2 years, and I continue to be in a growth mindset because I'm chronically learning new things. I attend conferences. I just attended an edunomics training. And this year, I completely agree with you that this citizens oversight is not, especially because it has the Brown Act embedded in there, it is not the easiest thing to understand. And so absolutely, Ms. Andrione, I apologize if I said your last name correctly. If you have questions about specific issues, always say, hey, can someone call me? Like, I want to chat with a board member. And if somebody has that question, of course, we're gonna pick up the phone, call you, and answer some of your questions. And I might say, hey, I don't know. Let me look it up. That is that happens all the time. And I just want to say what it's very difficult for me, and I'm going to tell you, for example, Ms. Sanders has a sign there that says resign. I want to tell you what's difficult for me as an elected official in a small town is that yesterday I woke up and 10 of these door hangers were plastered on my fence.
Then it must have been somebody who really doesn't like you because they hung one.
Targeted. My home was targeted. My home was targeted, and none of my neighbors.
Your home was not targeted. It was the entire neighborhood. No one even knows where you live, Paula.
And thank you. I have proof. I have 10 doorknobs. And this is what's difficult, right? That there is genuine parents who want to hear from us, have questions, and want responses. And I'm here to answer your questions. And if I don't have the answer, I will let you know. However, if someone just wants to intimidate me to resign, then I'm not available for that. I apologize. I was elected and I'm here to serve y voy a cumplir. And thank you.
You can answer any of the dozen emails I've sent you since February 14th, way before this.
So I'll speak more to this issue, Shay. And I appreciate you asking these questions. We need to deal with the phone lines being down. Are they really still down? Is that right? Because that's ridiculous. So we need to, somebody please call me, email me so we can get that resolved.
I'll do that because I heard that was still going on as of this week.
Yeah. So, and then regarding getting responses, if you're not being, so please go through your chain of command, which is, teacher, principal, and on, right? But then if you're not responded to, please, and you have my phone number, please email me and call me. And I absolutely am firmly in agreement that if someone is contacting us to harass us, no, sorry, we're not going to call you back. We're not going to email you back. It's going to go into a legal file or, a media response file, and it will be handled through someone who is not going to be directly harmed. So, but Shay, I really want to be able to support you getting the answers to the questions that you have. Communications is a very weak area for us, and we have acknowledged that publicly and privately over and over again. In fact, our commitment about these PTA meetings is precisely to try to do a stopgap while we work on this larger question of media support and public relations, communications, whether or not we might engage with a full-time communications professional and so forth. So we are very well aware that this is a super weak area for us, and we're doing our best to try to be scrappy about it right now in the meantime and try to do these little smaller gatherings to try to be more accessible. But again, if you're not being responded to, that's not appropriate. And we want to be able to get you the answers.
That is, thank you. I will send an email this week. I do feel, I mean, just alone from people here at Farragut and some others that just texted me, I don't know how, but I just got 4 people saying, please make sure they know that we have emailed, we have called, we haven't gotten a response. So
Okay, but
I haven't specifically reached out to you guys, but I have reached out to the superintendent and been ignored for months.
yeah, so forward that thread and we'll take care of it.
Yeah. And I think, if someone says like, hey, it's an email of just a lot of information and it doesn't say like, call me or please respond to my question, then, sometimes we receive it as public comment. We are receiving the information and we will read it and utilize it when we're making decisions. But, and sometimes I have to be honest, I work full time and I get paid by the district $268 a month. And so I don't have time, unlimited time to go through everything. And so that's why there's 5 of us so that we can all pitch in. So, but do please, if you want a response, please say in your email, I would like a response, a call back. If you want to call back, if you wanted an email response, please say, I would like an email response. And one of the things is we will be discussing this in one of our board retreats on how is it that we as a board want to respond, because we're not responding. And so we need to create a protocol for the new board to try to respond. And it's a great question, and we are going to continue to work on it. I think Catherine has a question. Ms. Estacio.
Hi, good evening. My question was also related to the calendar, but at the same time, I think my major issue is transparency. And I know, like what you said previously, you guys are not able to discuss certain things. But then at the same time, I think that all these issues, safety, calendar, there's so many issues right now. We were like, Culver City was one of the best school districts. And then now Culver City is like one of the worst districts because of all these issues. We are like publicly, like in media, in Facebook, social media, in the news. Does the board or the district have any plan to get out of this hole of like improving our district? I think that it all started with all these issues started because none of the parents knew what was going on, and it just compounded with all these things coming out, and there's all these rumors coming out. So like there's so many issues to address, but how are you, do you guys have a plan? I guess that's a basic question that I have.
Yeah.
Can you feel and sense my frustration?
Yeah, absolutely.
We feel it. We feel it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, just as an example, okay? Calendar aside, the safety issue aside, that was a big deal for our family. I actually had to buy my daughter an Apple Watch because of all the rumors that I heard about the fighting. So I had to make sure, like the phones are not allowed. She's too young, so I had to buy her an Apple Watch. So now I'm like, my son is in the robotics team, and we were fundraising for the team. So we were counting on the district promise that there's going to be $11,000 to help us go to the championship. And then now they're telling us, nope, we're not, you guys are not getting the money because there's all the requirements. So meanwhile, next week is the championship. So we are now trying to figure out how are we going to get $11,000 by next week?
Yeah.
This is a different issue, but I'm just saying there's so many issues.
I want to answer it.
Yeah, we actually had a conversation. Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can answer your questions. And that's why we're here. We are here to answer questions. So the robotics, we have always planned on sending the robotics fully funded. The barrier is actually about accommodations. So that's the sticking point right now. It's not a cost issue. There's no barrier financially. The district is covering the cost. So they're meeting tomorrow with the soup. There are a couple of parents from robotics meeting with the soup tomorrow to get final clarity on that. But it's a resolved issue. The part that is unresolved is the accommodations.
It's the accommodations. Okay.
They're getting.
So I can go back to the other people in our fundraising team and just say, it's going to get resolved and it will be the
Funding is
accommodation.
the funding is not a barrier. It's they're just resolving where there are, I'm sure you guys are aware that there are lots of liability issues with where the children can stay. They cannot be in a co-ed environment, et cetera. So there's logistics that have to be sorted out there.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I want to speak to the larger issue because it's a really fair point. I invite folks to be curious about how they measure excellence in their district. And there are ways, there are objective measures, there are test scores, there are, WASC accreditation, there are how many AP tests students are taking and passing, what colleges kids are going to, things like that. So there are some objective measures, and then there are these measures that are about how we feel and what our energy is. And that's really valid. And so on the former, we are a really excellent district and getting better on all the time. And I am happy to provide all the support and the data and the objective measures to that effect. But on the latter, we're really struggling this year, and people are feeling that their district is in decline. And so we are all hands on deck to try to rein that in and bring it back, because we are still an excellent and wonderful district, and we are in a very severe post-COVID crisis. We really are. The students are hurting. 1 in 5 kids are thinking about suicide. The CDC data is not good. The administrator crisis in the nation is very severe. We're having a hard time all over the nation hiring administrators and keeping them. We have some particular staffing crises. I'm prepared to answer detailed questions on that tonight if you want to get into why some of the staffing delays are really just very pervasive and statewide and nationwide. And so we're grappling with many matters that are out of our control. And then the communications being so poor at a time when there's a perception and an atmosphere of fear, those two things came together to create, what really was a debacle for a time. I will totally acknowledge that we didn't have a structure in place to be able to communicate and make people feel that we were being transparent at a time when things were getting messy. There were more fights for a period. We did have, a very bad incident with a security guard on campus. And so we did have multiple things happen all at a time when we were short on administrators and we didn't have a good communication strategy. And so that led to this moment that we're in. And I just don't ask you to, give me much benefit of the doubt or anything like that, but I do just want to say, and you can take it at face value or not, that we are doing our very best to rein all that back in. The objective measures are still there. CCUSD is still excellent. We will still have people clamoring at our door every single year to get a spot in this district. And we need to work on making our families feel that their kids are in the excellent district that they moved here for. And we are diligently working at getting back to that space.
Thank you.
It's a great question. And I think the only thing I do want to add, and I want to give some grace to our staff that has to deal with some of the legal matters that have come forth. It's not just that our staff, cabinet, and assistant superintendents have to do their day-to-day job. Since the election, they have had 12 public records requests. For the community members that don't understand, that is the community, 4 members of our community are asking information over and over to put campaigns forward that really create this bubble of information or misinformation and the rumors that you hear. So this has to go to legal. There's been 2 cure and correct. The public health department has been called. The fire department has been called by the community. And all of this, our staff needs to stop what they're doing and, you know, attend to these matters. The media has been called. And, you know, I just want to say, it's costing us thousands of dollars in legal fees and thousands of dollars in staff time. And I want to give them some grace because maybe they haven't responded to your emails. Know that these requests are very consuming of their time, in addition of their day-to-day. So I just want to say this is something that is happening, and I think you all need to know that this is what's happening.
Okay, so
I do want to say it's 8:00. So do we want to continue?
No, I think we're running out of time because our booster club has to also run their meeting as well. But I just want to end this with a comment. It's not a question, more of a comment. So this lack of communication, lack of transparent communication is something that I have seen as well. I'm not in touch with the board as much, but I have seen this with the superintendent as well as the assistant superintendent of DI. But I have to say I'm a bit disappointed with your response about having a job and not having the time, because honestly, I think that's more of an excuse. This is my first year on the PTA. I also have a job, but I have never taken more than 30 minutes to respond to an email, whether it's a complaint or it's just a thank you or any type of email. And I think everyone in the community can agree to that. So I think this communication is something you really need to work on.
I agree with you. And thank you for, you know, stating how important it is for you to respond to emails within 30 minutes. I unfortunately do not have that privilege, but I am grateful for your volunteering. And
Not within 30 minutes, Paula. Listen to what Sarah said. She said it's never taken her more than 30 minutes to answer an email, not a time frame of when to respond.
thank you.
I just want to say, can I say something really quick? Hi there,
I'm on a Zoom
everybody.
meeting.
I think we
Sorry.
need to move on because
Okay.
our fan club has to start their meeting. Sorry.
Amazing. No, it's okay. I just want to say, though, I think it's important for everyone to speak kindly to each other. I feel some of the tone and certain things, there might be some underlying things, but be kind and talk in a nice way. That's all.
I'll just add that we did have prepared answers to some of the questions that got sent. We didn't get to most of those. So what I would like to invite folks to do is to have one-on-one conversations. I know we're all talking about how busy we are, so maybe it sounds counterintuitive to make this suggestion, but I think that I'm feeling that there are still unanswered questions, and we are really on a mission to provide some resolution. So we're not here because we're trying to get out of answering questions. We're here because we want to answer them. So it wasn't enough time, and let's pick it up, you know, from this point. Hopefully you'll feel that you can email and call, and I'm happy to provide my cell phone number. Many of you already have it. So I'm really looking forward to answering the rest of your questions in a one-on-one session.